Special guest joining us right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. He is the Professor John Clayton. Check out his latest article over at the Washington Post. Gets into a topic that we've been talking about a lot here. What is the future of quarterbacks? Carson Wentz, Matthew Stafford, Ben Roethlisberger. It feels like this offseason could be a offseason of change. John Clayton gets into that in his Washington Post article. He joins us right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. John, how you doing on this Tuesday?
Good, Josh. How are you?
Doing pretty good. So I feel like we can't get away from quarterback conversation here because of what's going on in Philadelphia with Wentz and Hurts. And I find it interesting because you brought up Wentz in your article as a guy who could be moved. Now, we know there's some, issues with the salary and the contract with Wentz, but what do you think Wentz's future is? Because you brought him up as a potential to be moved among the other quarterbacks this offseason.
Yeah, but what I'm wondering is that if he's going to be moved, would this be more of a training camp move or an early season move? What we're going to see in the NFC, because of how you start the season with 12 quarterbacks making $21 million a year or more, and a lot of those quarterbacks are in their 30s, there's going to be more change this year in the NFC than there will be the AFC. All right, so now how do those changes work? And wrote that I still think that Drew Brees is going to retire. I think you can see that there's a decent chance that Matthew Stafford could be moved. And so there's going to be a lot of movement there. But now the question is going to be, can the Eagles get under the cap and then try to do something with Carson Wentz? And that's what I wonder about. With the guarantees, it almost might serve them better to wait until training camp, because at least when you get to training camp, you can lay off some of the stuff and then maybe see if a quarterback gets hurt and there's a need for a quarterback and they're willing to take more of the salary and stuff of that nature. But because when you look at that contract and the guarantees, particularly over a couple of years, it's going to be a hard one to move. It's not going to be, because again, he's a much better quarterback than some of the quarterbacks that they've had to move, like Brock Osweiler. He's a much better quarterback than that. But I think there's definitely going to be interest. But the question is, can the Eagles do it? Because the first thing they have to overcome is the salary cap. They're $80 million over the salary cap if it gets to $175 million.
It's been suggested that, a lot of a quarterback movement could be in connection with new head coaching situations. So how does that impact quarterbacks like Carson Wentz and others' potential movement this offseason?
Well, I think, for example, one of the things I was speculating on is that I still think Phillip Rivers is going to come back. I mean, I don't know if he's going to make the playoffs. Right now he's kind of on the outside looking in. But, he did exactly what I thought he was going to do, go into Indianapolis and make them an 11-win team. And, they played Jacksonville this week, and they're 10-5. So, I think they're going to be an 11-win team. But, I think they're going to be looking for that quarterback of the future. So now you've got an aggressive general manager in Chris Ballard. And, again, what's going to end up happening is the movement of the quarterbacks are going to come at a discount. In other words, you're not going to be giving up 2 number 1 picks to get a quarterback. Most of the guys are going to be given for maybe a second, third round choice, maybe 2/3 or something of that nature. And so now if you're Chris Ballard, do you make a move on Sam Darnold, have him kind of unwrap himself and get together, with Phillip Rivers and then, kind of get ready for the 2022 season? That could be the same thing with Carson Wentz. But whatever it's going to be, what Howie Roseman has to figure out is how do you try to move that contract when you're $80 million over the cap?
John Clayton joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. His latest article on the Washington Post. The NFL should see lots of quarterback movement this offseason. I really want to see Matthew Stafford. I'm glad you have the picture of him on the article. And you mentioned him going to the 49ers in the piece. And I really want to see Stafford go somewhere, John, because I feel like if this guy wasn't a Detroit Lion, people would view his career so much differently, because at the end of the day, he's put up incredible numbers and had some success with one of the worst franchises in the NFL.
Sure. Can you think about it? I mean, he made 4 playoff trips, but none in which he was able to come back and get a playoff win. But how much was that him, and how much was that the team around him? And I contend it was the team around him, because what ends up happening, and you've seen it for so many years. I mean, you get an easy schedule and then you make the playoffs. And then, of course, you get into the playoffs and now you're playing better teams and you're not up to being able to win those games. And so in the case of Stafford, I mean, he's got the ability to do it because he's got the great arm, the great mind, all the talent to do it. But has he had enough on defense and offense. And yeah, I'd like to see him in a different situation. Like the ideal team for him, but it's not going to work because of the cap, would be the New Orleans Saints. Because he can get down there with Sean Payton. He can get down there with a great offense. It's always, and they build a very good offensive line. But then just like the Eagles and the Saints are in worse shape as far as where they are with next year's cap. And so they won't be able to get a Stafford contract. That's why more than likely they're going to stay with Taysom Hill if Drew Brees retires and get Jameis Winston at a lower cost or a decent cost. So, but San Francisco is intriguing to me because I think you can see, and even with the comments made by Kyle Shanahan yesterday, that he said, I think he's going to be back, but he didn't say for sure. And, he's missed, 23 of 48 games since becoming a 49er, and availability is one of the most important things for a quarterback. So I think that if there's a possibility that Stafford's available for a second or a third round choice, I think they could take him and then do something with Garoppolo, whether getting him to New England or maybe Chicago because he's a Chicago native.
I think most people would assume New England because of his background, but you mentioned that he's Chicago native. Why do you feel like that is an option as well? Is it because of Matt Nagy, or is it because of the fact that they just have a situation where they just haven't had a quarterback since basically Jim McMahon?
Yeah, because, that's the thing. Mitch Trubisky's finishing well enough. Had they given him the fifth-year option, then I think they would definitely stand by him, but like they did with Nick Foles, bring in another quarterback. But now he's going to be on the open market. Now, that may not mean much because he may not be able to get much. But even if you're able to get Trubisky back at a discounted price, you still need to bring another quarterback in to compete. And that's why, you kind of wonder if they're going to give up on Nick Foles because that one didn't work out whatsoever. And then Garoppolo, I think, would be a very interesting option because, again, tall quarterback. I think Nagy can work real well with him because, he's worked with Patrick Mahomes and he's worked with, different quarterbacks through the years. So I think that could be an interesting fit. But it still comes down to if they can't get a Stafford or they can't get a Darnold, then I think they stay with Garoppolo.
John, I'm really interested to know your perspective on the Steelers situation with Ben Roethlisberger because I think Ben surprised some people saying, I'm interested in coming back next year. And he's had a solid year, but not a great year. And I know you started your career covering the Steelers many, many years ago. And I'm curious, what is the state of the Steelers moving forward? Because, Mason Rudolph, he didn't really impress a lot of people. The Steelers have tried to draft heir apparents for Ben, but a lot of them have fallen by the wayside. So what is the world like for the Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger next year and beyond?
Yeah, the plan has been for him to play 2 more years. Kevin Colbert's the general manager. He signs year-to-year contracts, and I think that he plans to go 2 more years, and he wants Ben to be there. And remember, Ben's got a $41.7 million cap number next year, which is the highest in the league, and they can just lay some of that off with replacing base salary with signing bonus and try to do that. So I think that plan is to try to bring him back. But when he was on that 3-game losing streak and looking bad, I think there was a lot of questions about the plan because he looked terrible. And now what we find out is that maybe it was the offensive play calling more than it was the throwing of Ben because they wanted him to get rid of the ball quicker. They wanted him to throw shorter passes. And then all of a sudden, everybody caught up to it. And so it's like, what's wrong with Ben? And so what he does is he junks everything at the half as far as the game plan, and then he just starts calling plays. The ball comes downfield. There's good zip in the ball. So I think what he did is that he at least put himself back in the mix to be able to stay for next year, maybe the year after that. But it looked pretty grim for 3 weeks. Remember, say what you want. He was up there in that top 5, top 6 for MVP candidates with what he was doing, with Claiborne, and what he's doing with Juju Smith-Schuster. And so he was looking great. But then all of a sudden he hit that bad patch. But I think now he's shown it's like, hey, listen, I'm still here. And Mike Tomlin basically said, okay, take the week off, get you ready for the playoffs.
John Clayton joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow John on Twitter at John Clayton NFL. Check out his latest post in the Washington Post. The NFL should see lots of quarterback movement. Check out the full list of quarterbacks he projects to move this offseason. John, one of your notes in around the NFL, I think, is very poignant for us in this area, talking about the NFC East won't become the worst division in NFL history. Explain that little information for our audience.
Yeah, because the worst was the NFC West back in 2008 when they went 10 and 30 in non-division games. And of course, some people include the division games, but they're all going to work out to be even because one team's going to win, one team's going to lose, or one team's going to make a tie. But at least with the fact that you had the 2 4-game winning streaks by the Giants and the 4-game winning streak by Washington, it put them a little bit over the top. So they ended up with 11, 28, and 1. And so at least it saved the day. And of course, what's also saving the day is that late streak by Washington, by certainly the Giants. Now it looks and appears that it could be a more respectable 7-win division, depending on how it goes over the weekend. But I mean, it was grim, and you saw it. It's like basically you watched 2 divisions gain so much from the NFC East. You had the 12-4 record of the NFC West going against the NFC East. That got everybody almost like 3 wins, with one exception, that being the Rams. And then, of course, you saw what was happening with the AFC North, and that may get 3 teams into the playoffs with what they were able to do. So it was still one where at least that little streak with those 2 teams made it a little bit more respectable, and it made it not the worst division in NFL history.
John, I'm curious, which team do you think in the NFC East has the best future moving forward? Because I think there's a lot of questions with all 4 franchises, but which of the 4 do you think has the best future moving forward?
I kind of, right now, maybe look at the New York Giants because, say what you want. I mean, Daniel Jones is talented. He just makes too many turnovers. That's his big problem, and he's got to fix that. But he's got talent, and I think that they're getting better on the offensive line. They actually have a pretty good defense. That's the one thing that nobody really knew, and you know that from watching all the Eagle games and the NFC East games. They didn't play any quarterbacks, all these teams, and yet you knew that the Eagles were good on defense. I didn't know how good the Giants were on defense until I know they were ranked top 10 to when they played Seattle, and they stuffed Seattle. They did such a great job. And the Washington football team has a great defensive line, and so really, you look at the Giants as one that I think maybe can emerge. You've got a lot of problems right now in Dallas. I mean, Dallas in the NFC East has the most talent. I think they started the season with 15 players who have been to the Pro Bowl, but now, of course, it's watered down because of all the injuries on the offensive line, injuries at linebacker, and so it's kind of broken down there, and they've been horrible. But I think right now the Giants are kind of the younger team, and the team might be a little bit better. But then, hey, this is the NFC East. I mean, for the last several years, it hasn't been good.
No, it hasn't. And that's why I go to the next question, which is some people have said that, hey, the Eagles have won the division, had success, but it's in a bad division. So how do we balance the fact that Doug Pederson got this team to 3 straight playoff appearances and missed it this year, but it's in a bad division? How do we weigh that?
Well, I think what you weigh is, what happened on the offensive line causing problems, the lack of wide receiving help. I mean, when you're basically taking practice squad players and they're your main receivers, Greg Wards and guys like that, you got problems. And that's what I think the main problem was. I mean, the Eagles have been and continue to be good on defense, but what did Carson Wentz really have to work with? I mean, it's a great 2 tight end offense, but then the 2 tight ends ended up getting hurt. And so that threw things back. So, I looked at the Eagles as being, one of the success of that team is still the talent, because you can argue between Dallas and Philadelphia. Those are the 2 most talented teams in the division. And then things went south on the injury front for just about all those 2 teams. But in the end, what you worry about with the Eagles is what is going to be the collateral damage of the salary cap, because they are in tough shape right now. Now, Howie Roseman's one of the best, if not the best in the game, so he'll figure it out. But, I mean, that there's not going to the Sean Jackson probably won't be there. That Alshon Jeffrey won't be there. That Jason Peters won't be there on the offensive line. They're probably going to have to go to one linebacker. And so you throw all that together, this is going to be a team that's going to have so much dead cap money that it's going to be really tough next year to maybe a playoff team. But again, who knows if all the other teams in the NFC East are still at that 6-7 win level.
He's John Clayton. Check out his latest article over at the Washington Post. The NFL should see lots of quarterback movement this offseason. You can see the full list of predictions over there on the Washington Post. As all guest John Clayton joined us on the Boardwalk Hotline. John, thanks so much for jumping on today.
Okay, Josh, thanks.